It's amazing. It's sad and eerie.
It's interesting. I mean, it shows the man's inhumanity towards man.
So this seemed like something I'd never quite seen before, so it was kind of a natural choice to come check it out, because where else are you going to find something quite like this?
Being from Chicago, we are constantly surrounded by news reports and broadcasts about our current-day gun violence and reminders of our violent reputation. All of this begged us to ask the question, why, as human beings, do we have such a fascination and adoration for violence? To find our answer, we took to the open road and found ourselves traveling down I-55 to Alton, Illinois, a small town 5 hours southwest of Chicago off the Mississippi River. Once we reached Alton, we headed towards the historic and charming downtown area, where we met just the person to help us find an answer to our question.
I'm Janet Kolar, and I am the owner and curator of the Historic Museum of Torture Devices. The devices that are in there are all replications. I have them made, but they're historically accurate. 2 of my 4 children and I went to Europe. We were in the Czech Republic, and we were in Prague. We were staying there, and we were actually looking for family, but we didn't find family. But one day we just blundered into the torture museum, and we were astounded. And we went back the next day and carefully read everything and took pictures and looked at everything. And that night, over a couple bottles of wine, my son said, "I think we should take one to the States." And I said, "I'm in." So we did.
Janet and her family later opened the Museum of Historic Torture Devices in the Wisconsin Dells of Wisconsin in 2005. After much success, they decided to sell the museum and open the Historic Museum of Torture Devices in Alton in January of 2011.
I think that people come to tour a museum like this because of curiosity, and it has a strange fascination. Like when you pass an automobile accident on the road, everybody looks, and there's a certain feeling of, I'm glad it was him and not me.
Some of the torture devices in the museum include the Chinese death cage, in which prisoners were encased in the cage with only their heads peeking out at the top. They were usually left in town squares as a humiliation tactic, but all too often died of exposure, starvation, dehydration, strangulation, and infection. Another device featured at the museum is the rat torture cage, where live rats were placed into a cage or bucket, then strapped to the prisoner's abdomen. The person inflicting the torture would then set the end of the cage or bucket on fire, causing the rats to burrow into the victim's stomach or chest in order to escape the heat.
That probably got me more than any other thing here, that they eat through the intestines to get out. That was very morbid.
I get a variety of responses from the people who go to the museum. Some of them are terrified. Some people don't stay to look at everything. That has only happened a few times. But usually if someone reads all the material in there, they come out and they say something like, "That's really amazing. I didn't know they did that." And it is the history that you don't find in the history books.
The feeling even coming in as you're looking at the things and reading what they were used for, I don't know, I got a physical kind of like sick sensation. But it's, just something that, you don't really want to think about horrible things like that happening to people, and that they did, it's just kind of crazy, so.
If I had the opportunity to torture another person, the device that I would pick would probably be the rack. The rack is about 8 to 10 feet long, and there are heavy chains, and the person is bound hands and feet, and then when a crank is turned, everything stretches. And every joint in the body, the arms are up, so it messes up the shoulders, and all the joints are affected. That can be used for torture and is not necessarily fatal.
The Judas cradle. It just, I don't know, it seems like the most morbid kind of thing and really painful, extremely painful, so, yeah.
The Judas cradle is a large spike in which nude prisoners were placed upon, with the spike inserted in either their rectums or, if you were a woman, your vagina. Strong ropes were tied to the victim in such a way so that they could be lifted up off the spike, then slammed back down multiple times. Even more disturbing, this tactic is still used in some areas of South America today.
I think probably the worst device in the museum, the one that I would really not want to be tortured by, is the pear. The pear is a device with blades that open. There's a screw mechanism. They could be placed in the mouth, and if they were placed in the mouth and opened all the way, the jaw would be broken and dislocated, and people who had had that done to them could never close their mouth again. And it comes in different sizes. There's a larger size for the mouth, but they also inserted them in other body orifices. And it's like a precursor to a gynecologic speculum. And they put them in people's rectums or vaginas.
We asked Janet what she hopes to give back to the public and her community with the unique museum, and what she hopes her guests gain from the experience.
When guests leave the museum, my expectation for them, or my desire for what they got out of it, is a further knowledge in maybe a subject that they had never thought about. And I think that many of them say, I'm so glad I didn't live in those times. So I think it's important to know what people are capable of or had been capable of.
Janet shared her opinion with us on why human beings seem to have a fond relationship and long history with violence and torturous acts.
The reason I think that human beings are capable and are fascinated by ways to harm others and violence, beating people up, that sort of thing, I think it's a basic human instinct that probably cavemen did it. And I mean, all through the ages, these are, the items in the museum represent mostly about 600 years ago. And it's been going on forever.
In the end, the Historic Museum of Torture Devices helped us see how man has turned torture into an art form. And we were able to consider that maybe the answer to our question is that violence is simply a part of who we are as a species. Perhaps it is in all of us. Perhaps some of us just have to dig a little deeper to see it.